welcome to Fit&Mind. This channel is dedicated to well-being, physical and mental health. So today's guest is an amazing woman who is the founder of the Wellness Lounge. She's a health and wellness coach, wellness speaker, and workshop facilitator. She supports people in setting clear boundaries to prevent burnout in their professional and also in their personal life. She also developed a one-on-one coaching program, and she provides coaching nationwide and also across the world with clients in the US, UK, India, Germany, France, and so on. So please welcome Gillian O'Gorman from Ireland. Hi, Gillian. Nice to have you here.
Thank you for the invite. I'm excited to talk with you today.
I'm so excited too, and really thanks for having your time for us. So we're going to talk about a very important topic. I think it's not only important, like for me it's very important, of course, but in general, for everyone, it should be number one. So it is healthy boundaries. And I know you're passionate about this topic too. Why is that? What are healthy boundaries?
Well, I suppose maybe first of all, I'll define what a healthy boundary means to me. So when I talk about boundaries and I'm explaining to people what boundaries are, I split it into physical boundaries and emotional. So physically, what are we okay with, around other people, our personal space. You'll often hear people talking about personal space, or you'll hear people talking about consent. Emotionally, again, where do we feel safe, emotionally safe in relationships? What's our responsibility? What is the responsibility of another person? You'll hear people, codependency, feeling another person's emotions, prioritizing another person's needs. So for me, our boundaries are about where is our time and energy being spent? And we're talking about energy, not just that physical energy, but that mental energy. So again, healthy boundaries all are about the person, what's unique to that person. So we're all unique on this planet. We all have values. We all have beliefs. We all have a gut instinct. What is a yes for me? What is a no for me? What am I comfortable with? What do I feel safe with? And, what am I okay with as such? So why am I passionate about boundaries? Well, because I had no idea, no education around them. It wasn't something that was spoken about, in my earlier years of teen years, 20s, 30s. And I found myself in emotionally abusive relationships. I found myself experiencing burnout in work, not just once, but twice. And I really had to assess what was taking my time and energy and what were my needs, and why at times was I prioritizing the needs and feelings of another person. So through support and looking at this, I realized that I had no healthy boundaries, and it wasn't something that was role modeled to me when I was growing up. So it was something that I had to learn. And like all the work that I do, when I learn something, I'm passionate about sharing with other people and getting people comfortable in protecting themselves, protecting their emotional space and their physical space, and becoming, comfortable with saying no. And really, this for me is self-care. That is self-care really in a nutshell. And that will show up differently for different people in different situations.
Yes, yeah, I completely agree. And also, I think what's difficult about this, at least for me, but I see it, when I talk to my friends or even to my family or clients, that people tend to think that if you set healthy boundaries, it's a selfish thing. And that's why I think for many people, especially, I was the same, as you said, in my 20s. And I was, hesitating always, like, okay, I have my gut instinct and I know that it's a no inside or it's a yes inside, but am I selfish if I do that, if I say no? So, and I still think today is difficult to do that, because a lot of people just say, okay, you are selfish if you set boundaries, and people are struggling with it really. So that's why it's important.
Yeah, I mean, I think if what you say there resonates with people and they're saying, yeah, I find that there's pushback, or yeah, I do feel, guilty, or I feel like it's wrong, that's a sign that you need to start establishing or developing boundaries and just having a strategy to do so. So again, a lot of those kind of fears around having boundaries can stem from your beliefs. Okay, so it could be that you have a belief that it's not nice to say no, okay, or it's selfish to say no. And that's something that, you could have heard growing up. You could have heard it at home with your parents. You could have heard it at school. A teacher could have said it to you. Friends could have said it to you. Like, we're sponges as young kids, and we're picking up these statements and these beliefs, and it's becoming our truth. And, we get to a certain stage in our life and we start examining these and we're like, okay, these beliefs aren't actually working for me anymore. They're not supporting me in being my best self. So when I meet with a client, first of all, and we start to look at maybe why they're experiencing burnout or why they find themselves in toxic relationships, I ask them what their beliefs are around a certain situation, and how comfortable are you in saying yes to yourself and no to another person? And we usually have this scale of 1 to 10, and the average of the comfort level is usually about 3. So it is very widely experienced that people don't have a level of comfort in establishing boundaries unless that they have learned it at a young age or it's been role modeled to them. I would say at times as well, saying no in the home environment had a big reaction. So a parent may have had a big reaction. They may have said that you're being naughty, or you may have been disciplined. The same in school. There may have been a big reaction, which embedded a fear that, I have a fear around what is the fallout of me saying no to this. So it's easier for me just to say yes. And so that belief then becomes a habit, and the habit then is a behavior, and the behavior results in a reaction to that. So there can be times when you're having relationships with friends for a long time and you start doing the work, or you're in a relationship and you start doing the work, and your gut is telling you, I'm not okay with this. Like I've been acting like I am. And we become so accustomed to not listening to our gut because, again, if we don't have healthy boundaries, we are more accustomed and we care more about what the other person feels. Because again, we might feel like, well, I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want to feel guilty. And all these limiting beliefs are now driving these behaviors. And then when we do express our opinion, or we do say no to something, or we pull back for something, and somebody has a big reaction, then you have to question, how healthy is this relationship that I'm in? Because somebody's having a big reaction, or they're projecting their fear onto me, and all I'm trying to do is express a need. So I say to people, play around with the word no, become comfortable. You don't actually just say no to somebody, but you develop no statements. Can I get back to you on that? I'm not too sure I'm available. And sometimes it's actually disengaging from a conversation because you're not ready to actually give the answer. So again, are offering a solution as well. I don't think that's going to work for me, but maybe we can look at this. So you start to slowly meet your own needs because you've developed the language and the statements that support you, your values as well. So everybody can do this. It's just about having a strategy. And I think it's about identifying what are my beliefs and where did I learn them? And sometimes with clients, it's like, oh my God, my father used to always say to me, or my mother. And it's not about associating blame with the parent. It's just trying to understand what's driving your behaviors, which are creating your experiences. And the most beautiful thing that people can do is actually assess their life. What are they happy with? What are they not? And start to peel back, as we say, the layers of the onions, going, what is making me tick? What's working for me? What's not? Because we can, we can figure it out and we can adjust it and we can go easy with it as well.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes, you are so right. And it's just so many things that such a good information.
Sorry, I'm so passionate about it.
It's really, I love it because it's just everything that I learned in the last few years, because as I said, I also struggled with healthy boundaries. I really think that even though I think I'm so much better in that now in the last few years, I think I'm still learning. Like, I know that I definitely have situations where I still have to tell myself, no, it's okay to say that, it's okay to say my opinion, it's okay to say no. So I think it takes a while, but you can definitely learn it, and that's the good news, I think. Even
I'm
yeah.
still learning. It's not something that comes naturally for me still. Giving yourself the gift of space in a situation. So not feeling like you have to give an answer there and then, and going away and reflecting, that can kind of help a little bit. But again, you know, there'll be relationships in our life, family, you know, long-term friends, people we work with, people we spend a lot of time with, that it can be more difficult, you know, it can be definitely more challenging.
Yes. What you say about, for example, family or people who you are close to, I think it's always more difficult to set these healthy boundaries. But that's the very good news for everyone, that you can actually learn it, and you can have a strategy, and you can practice. That's why you are here, to help people with that. And yeah, I really feel that you mentioned something at the beginning, and I just keep thinking about it when you said emotional boundaries and also physical boundaries, because I think most people, when they think about healthy boundaries, they think about more, you know, emotional boundaries. But what you said, physical boundaries, are so important too. How you feel comfortable next to someone, and can you say no? That's like, you, for example, you cannot stand so close to me. Can you move just an inch away or something? You know, even like in small, easy situations. I really think that most people don't even think about that, but that's so important too in everyday life.
Well, I work in a university with a lot of, you know, students, and I feel that is something that I'm observing more and more, where younger people are more aware around their physical boundaries, what they feel comfortable with and what they don't. And I feel, you know, again, that whole area of consent, and I'm not just like sexual consent, but even, you know, when you're out socializing, you know, how people are interacting, moving around with each other, there is a different expectation, there's a different level of boundaries being expressed than when I was younger, definitely. And so, you know, it is interesting to see, and again, it's, you know, I guess it's more coming from that, you know, maybe education from, you know, maybe my age group now, or maybe talking because of what they experienced kind of growing up, you know, to their kids, you know, about having healthier boundaries physically. If you're not comfortable with something, don't do something, you know, you don't have to. Whereas I don't remember getting those messages when I was growing up, and you know, it was just this kind of a free for all nearly, you know, and, you know, physically, emotionally as well. And I talked to a lot of people as well around this, and maybe the education wasn't there, but also, you know, I grew up without social media, so maybe the extent of the issue wasn't really known as well. We were quite insular in Ireland as well. So physical boundaries, because a lot of people are triggered if people actually, you know, invade their space.
Yes.
And again, that can make people feel very very unsafe as well. But that's not everybody. And that's going back to that first topic as well. I can't say to people, this is what you have a healthy boundary. You have to decide what's important for you, you know, what makes sense for you. It's going to look and feel different for everybody. So that's why I always start by asking people about their values. You know, what is it they value? And if people value safety, we kind of look at what that looks like for them. If people value respect, again, where is respect been shown to them in their relationships? You know, if people value being seen and heard and understood, all those things, is that showing up in your relationship? And if not, you know, what are you going to do about that? You know, what's the next step to do about that? You know, so And I think, again, you mentioned when you were, talking about your own experience, about the guilt that people feel. I always say to my clients, don't let that surprise you. Know that that's going to happen. So you're going to feel guilty. So how do we actually move through that? So again, how can you support yourself through that guilt? What story are you telling yourself? And what story of support can you tell yourself? If you know a negative emotion is going to come, you can actually create a strategy of support to talk yourself through that. Like, here it is, okay, but I know I need to do this. It's okay to feel like this. It doesn't mean that I let my boundary lapse. So
Yes.
Again, it's just practicing that new train of thought. It's like rewiring your subconscious with a new belief, with a new way of being to support yourself.
Yeah. It's oh my God, yeah, it's so true. And I just imagine this whole thing, as you said, just wire, our brain. It's like a computer when there is a program on it, because that was on it all the time, like since we were born. I mean, even some stress factor and genetically what we get from our parents and grandparents, and then we also learn the way we grow up, how to behave, and whether we are allowed to be angry or say no or be sad and set any boundaries or not. And I really think that just answers the question, why are so many people struggling with that? Because it all comes down to how we grow up. It all comes down to education as well, I guess, in school, what they tell us, and also society. I think it can differ in different countries. That's what I see.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, so you said at the beginning in my intro that I have clients right around the world, but I would see that boundaries, is a problem right around the world. Again, a lot of what comes up for me outside of culture, yes, culture will have different kind of ways of dealing with things, or, maybe more confident in one area. But ultimately, in my experience, with the clients I've worked with, it goes back to that family unit. You talked about like emotions and like allowed to have emotions. A lot of people weren't allowed to feel certain things growing up. There was busy parents out working, big families. And so you could be dismissed, and you mightn't express yourself properly, and therefore you don't really feel important or heard. So therefore you don't really have a value for yourself and your feelings. And as you get older, when you really want to speak up in relationships, you're not really having that value for yourself and your feelings. So it's kind of like you're repressing them, and you're just kind of going with the flow, looking for harmony, looking for peace. So in my experience, if people want to understand themselves more, it is about exploring, what actually was okay in the household and maybe what wasn't. But doing it with a kind of a curiosity, not really associating blame, more kind of trying to figure out, because once we actually find those blocks, then we can start to, unblock them. I always go back to my, original work, which was the work of Louise L. Hay. And I trained in her program, You Can Heal Your Life. And I remember hearing, one of her affirmations, a belief is just a thought and you can change your thoughts. And I had to kind of think about that. And then I was like, it's that easy. You just feel that like they're in there and they're locked in, and that's it. That's who you are. But, as because of the work that you do in yourself and how you support people, there's an opportunity to grow and change all the time. We just have to be willing to do it, so willing to do it, being open to do it. And I feel the more open we are and the more curious we are, the more data we receive, and the more that we have to work with as such. And that's why coaching is great, because then you can kind of use your coach as a sounding board to kind of figure it out as such.
Yes. And as you said about the beliefs, many times, or mostly, I would say, when we have those beliefs and thoughts, we just realize after a while that they are not our beliefs and thoughts. As you said, they are just programmed, and And that's why I think it's like, if we want to change it, we can change it. But I always say to my clients and friends as well, that I think that we don't have to, and we can do everything by ourselves. Like, we need coaches like you, we need therapists, we need people who are helping, because there are some things that we cannot and we don't have to do on our own. So what do you think, how to start by this, how to start setting healthy boundaries, and how can you help in that?
Well, I mean, just on your last point, I think it's really important that you and I do say that we don't just provide support to people, but we go to people to get support as well.
Of course.
I mean, currently I have a breathwork person I go to. I have another somatic therapy, Seiki Soma it's called. So it's again, all the body work, releasing all that negative trauma from the past. And I go to a therapist, and I'm starting this EMDR therapy, which is all about rewiring the brain from traumatic experiences, where you can kind of develop those beliefs, which is it's not safe to say no, or, you know, I'm not enough, and all those things. So I'm constantly looking for ways that I can heal, evolve, and grow, and share that with other people. So I think, you know, sometimes people think that we're just kind of like delivering, but we're learning, and then we're bringing that into our work. And I think that's down to our authenticity, you know. So again, that's why we're passionate about doing, you know, what we're doing. I would say, you know, for anybody who is interested in learning more about boundaries, it depends where you're at, okay? Like, I have people contact me all the time who are burnt out, but sometimes they feel that getting help or being vulnerable is another failure. They want to figure it out themselves, okay? Because another driver for burnout can be insecurity. I don't feel good enough. I don't have enough. I must do more. I must have more. So they're pushing. So to go for some coaching or therapy or anything kind of that may look at these insecurities might be uncomfortable. So sometimes you can learn from a podcast, you can learn from a book, you know, you can go to YouTube, you can look things up, and that might be a nice entry point for some people. I find when I'm starting to look at things myself, I go on to like Spotify or, you know, Apple, whichever, and I look up the topic and I listen to a podcast, and I'll go, oh, okay, I think I want to explore that more. That's how I got into EMDR. It was through doing that. If you really want to feel held and supported, then I would say take that step, reach out to somebody who is working in that area, be it a coach, be it a therapist. Knowing the difference between the two, therapy will kind of look back, you know, coaching will kind of look forward, you know, so there will be questions to see where you're at now, what's driving your behavior now, where do you want to go? So for me, when somebody comes to me, that 6-week coaching course that I've developed, it's all about creating balance, having boundaries, having non-negotiables, avoiding or recovering from burnout. So we look at where you are now, but like, what does balance look like to you? What is a balanced lifestyle? What would be your non-negotiables to feed into that? You know, what is a kind of a healthy boundary? You know, where are your trigger points? So it's kind of a goal-orientated, kind of focused program that really gives you a lot of information about yourself. So, you know, there's books out there. I have loads of books on boundaries before I started really digging in on the work. The more you surround yourself with the topic, you're learning all the time. And in that learning, you don't feel alone, and you realize that there's a high population in the world that struggle with boundaries. And you realize that there's so many people out there codependent, or you learn about things like narcissism and how narcissistic people really can kind of find people, you know, who have poor boundaries and get in and manipulate. And all of a sudden you feel, oh, this isn't just me, this is the thing. So I'm actually okay. You start to feel more, for want of a better word, speaking from my own experience, normal. So realize, I was programmed to put somebody else's needs first. This is a thing. I remember when I joined this online coaching program with a great coach in America. This is back in 2020, and it was about codependency. And I had read the book Codependent No More. And some of it resonated with me, but it talked a lot about alcoholism. And I had no experience of that, but I had experience of putting other person's needs before me and feeling another person's feeling. So from that, I went to this group coaching, where you actually once a week were on a group coaching call with people across the States and Europe, and we all had similar experiences. And so I started to feel normal. I started to feel like, oh, this is a thing, and there's strategies, and that was the place I heard that expect the guilt and find a strategy to work towards or through it. And I was like, oh, that's wow. Okay. Like, why am I being kind of floored by that guilty feeling every time it happens? And then I want to just make the other person happy because they seem really upset with me. But now I'm like, oh, okay, they're having that reaction. This is what's making me feel this, da, 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 da. But I'm not going to say yes. I'm still going to say no. So tune in with your gut. Is it a book? Is it a podcast? Is it looking up for a program? Is it finding a group? There's so much out there. People don't need to be alone, and find a comfortable entry point if you do want to create more balance and more healthy relationships in your life.
Yes, I love what you're saying, and I agree that it also depends on the person, of course, depends on the situation, depends on the background, and a lot of things, how they start. So yeah, some people can just start with reading books, listening to podcasts, because that can be really helpful for them. And maybe they can actually start practicing and having a strategy, even even not going to coaching or therapy. And also what you mentioned, I love that you separated coaching and therapy, because that's very important to find what's good for you. For some people, it's really better to focus on coaching, like the present and the future, and the strategy itself, and practicing. But some people, maybe they have to go to therapy, and I think I really love that when I see therapists or coaches where some people find them and they talk, they have an introduction talk, let's say, and then they say, look, I can help you with this and that, but maybe you should consider, getting to the root of it and going to a therapy as well, or start with that, because I think it's so important to realize that like a program is different for everyone, and one thing is not good for everyone. So I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah, I've referred clients to therapists, when things have gone a certain direction where I'm not equipped to deal with that, because as I said, sometimes you will evoke a memory, or, there could be then a little bit of anger or unresolved trauma with regards a caretaker, and it's something that I would say that I think you need to explore that with a therapist, and then we can kind of come back. But again, when I meet obviously with clients, I contract around that, and so that's already kind of agreed that if something comes up, there will be that kind of referral. What's great is that there's loads of coaches who are now therapists as well, so there is this kind of model that has really evolved in the last few years around relationship coaching, and they're psychotherapists as well. So it's kind of practical tools. You look at like somebody like Gabor Mate, who talks a lot. Yeah, and he's educated so many of us around what trauma is, the difference between the big T trauma and the little t. And the little t being those smaller things that still have a huge impact. When somebody had an outburst at you, or maybe you didn't feel safe emotionally. And we just kind of dismissed all those things because they weren't the bigger things. And so a lot of us fell through the cracks because we felt like we had these perfect experiences, and we look back now, we're like going, actually that wasn't great. And so again, I think because there has been so much awareness brought to honoring our, experiences from, childhood that may not have always been so easy for us, because we're, small little people that can't really cope with these big emotions, and maybe not feeling, heard or seen or understood. And Gabor will talk about then how that kind of can lead to, future addiction, or, mental health issues, or, physical issues as well. And I've often shared with people, I have an autoimmune condition, so I feel like it's through years of chronic stress. That's why I do all the somatic therapy now, just trying to calm down the nervous system, calm down because of all the behaviors that I have become accustomed to using, because I'm not always feeling safe. So when you go to a coach who's also a therapist, that's like, there's so much information there as well. But not everybody needs that. Like, my program is an entry point for people if you're, because as I said, I've been burnt out twice. My belief is, even though the World Health Organization will define burnout as a workplace phenomenon, I can hardly say the word, what I have experienced myself and what I have seen through people I've worked with is people burn out in relationships, people burn out in other areas of their life, anywhere they feel they have a responsibility. There can be worry, stress, overwhelm, fear that can lead to burning out. So that mental fatigue, that exhaustion, that difficulty making decisions, that brain fog, that distancing yourself from your loved ones, it can, be experienced in other areas. So my program really is, again, helping people to connect to themselves and putting boundaries around that. So it's quite, there's a structure to it. And what I love about it is when I meet people who I've coached before, they're now talking about their values and how they really make decisions based on their values. And they're talking about boundaries around family or boundaries around work. And they're saying it in a way that it's just part of their life now. And that just gives me so much joy when I see that, because I'm like, wow, they sound more boundary than me, So it's just when you give your client permission to do this, and then they give themselves permission to do it. And, that's kind of where the music happens, the magic. It's just people are living their lives, and their time and energy is their own, as opposed to being given out all the time with no boundary around it.
I love that. And what you said about just giving permission, because really a lot of people never got that permission, and they just need to get that permission that, yes, first of all, you can feel the way you feel. You can have negative emotions. You just name it and you feel it, but you can work through that. And yes, you can say no, and you can be who you are, and you don't have to accept, anyone who is, anyone who cannot accept no from you.
Exactly.
Because that comes down to safety. You mentioned that at the beginning as well, that to feel safe, and you have to look at your relationships anywhere where if you say no, or not just even no, but if you say, sorry, can we get back to it, but just give me a few minutes or a few days. And if you find that constantly you get very, very angry and negative emotions and feedback because of that, then you have to really look at that relationship. That's not safe. It's not a safe environment.
Yeah. And again, a healthy relationship may not have been role modeled to us. So sometimes we have to go figure out what is a healthy relationship, so if there's kind of outbursts and, anger and fear, that's signs that things aren't maybe as good as they could be. A fear to have conversations, fear of you expressing yourself. I've been in those type of relationships, but also I've also been the person who felt fear and had, expressed it as well in not such a healthy way. So, we have to look at ourselves as well, and how are we participating in supporting another person's boundaries? So it's not just about us. So how are we respecting another person's boundaries? The more work you do around relationships and understanding people, you'll understand attachment styles. So you'll understand that some people are anxiously attached. That would be me. I'm anxious. I'm worried about other people's feelings. I want to prompt them. Are we okay? Am I okay? Is everything okay? And then you would have like avoidant. So they're the people then who need time to process. They need to go away and think about it. And that triggers an anxiously attached person. So again, I would have heard from people, I need this space. And my anxious attachment would actually then put pressure on that person and not respect their boundary. So it's really important that we see how we show up in relationships as well, and actually try to understand each other. And it takes two, really, I suppose, emotionally mature, emotionally available people to participate in those conversations. Yeah, because they can be difficult, because it's where you're actually challenging each other and giving it kind of the space it needs to figure it out. So sometimes we don't understand another person's boundary. So we're like, no, that's wrong. I need you to do, and that warrants that conversation. And equally us expressing why we need something as well, because what we need to feel safe, again, will look different for other people. But it's that willingness to have those conversations, to actually understand. And when we understand ourselves, and then we're willing to understand another person, I think both sides start to calm a little bit. And that's where the compromise kind of like, starts to come into operation, and that understanding. And sometimes there won't be that, and people have to go, their separate ways, be that, friendships, be that partnerships, be that like colleagues that you work with as well, where you're just constantly clashing because you're not respecting each other's boundaries, because you're not really understanding. People will trigger people, so being aware of yourself, but being willing to get to know the other person and what's important to them too.
Yes. And I really think that the more you know yourself, the more you can actually work with other people in relationships and any kind of partnerships. That's why I always say to everyone, and sometimes I feel like I'm saying that so much and like I'm repeating myself, but that's so true. Self-awareness for me is the key, because really if you get to know yourself, it's so much easier to take when someone says no to you, and to see why, and to give space to someone else. So yeah, it's a two-way street, as you said. It's not only about me, it's all about my relationship as well.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you're still learning. Of course, we are still learning and learning about ourselves, but when did you start realizing that, okay, you have to change something? What was the point when you said, okay, you need to set healthy boundaries?
I remember being in a cafe in Galway with my brother back in 2017. And he had just come out of a relationship, a long-term relationship. And we had this conversation around boundaries. And I remember the naivety, we still talk about this, where I'm like, do you know that there's this thing called boundaries, where people actually, they actually put rules and limits around their relationship? And he said, no, but tell me more. And he'd been in a 20+ year relationship. So I remember back in 2017 becoming aware of this topic, and it was through my coaching diploma, because we'd look at boundaries. And so it had planted the seed that there was this whole concept where you actually got to control your life and put limits and rules around, you know, your interactions and your relationships. So that's when I realized, you know, that I didn't have that, and I started to examine, you know, maybe where that was. That's led to kind of a deep dive over the last 6 years, and I would say the last 3 years quite deeply around, you know, examining my life, my past, my relationships, and what I struggle in kind of saying no to, you know, and then really kind of seeing that in some relationships, like friendships or work relationships, that might be easier for me to have boundaries. But those closer family are, you know, romantic relationships, they're my trigger point. And so I think it's especially over the last 3 years, not just identifying that I need to have healthy boundaries, it was more looking at, why don't I have healthy boundaries? So what is it that I really struggle with, and why? And so having that compassion for myself, and saying there are circumstances in my life that are repeating, and there's different people, but the circumstance, you know, the outcome is the same. So what's leading to this? And so that really kind of brought a level of awareness that I hadn't really had before. Not just what, so there's kind of the, okay, first part, what are boundaries? There's this thing called boundaries. Then kind of going, okay, I need to actually have some boundaries. And then going, why don't I have some boundaries? Because again, you can see people who are having different experiences. And I spent my 20s self-shaming myself, because I would compare myself to other people who would be in relationships. And I used to hear them say, oh, I would never do that about something that I had done. Or kind of, you know, not really intending to hurt me, but say, you know, say things like, I'd have more self-respect now than doing that. And this could have been me now taking somebody back, or me reaching out to an ex and contacting them. And people were very free with their judgments around that. And now I understand why I did those things, because I didn't have healthy boundaries and I didn't have a sense of myself. And I was an anxiously attached person. So I was constantly looking for that security outside of myself. So I have such compassion for myself now, because I understand why I didn't. And I understood how I was functioning, but that something needed to change if I wanted different outcomes. I was expressing an affirmation this morning. I'm on a daily meditation call at 6:45 every morning, and we were, asked on our meditation to bring in an affirmation. I am, and we finished the sentence, and the word that came to me was whole. I am whole. I am whole. I'm whole. It's just me, and I am whole. I am enough. And so when you start to do the work around boundaries, healthy boundaries, you realize that you're okay, and it's okay to say no, and it's okay to be you, and it's okay to have all these feelings, and just keep coming back to yourself. So it's such a worthwhile journey, and it's kind of like a rebirth in many ways. You're giving yourself an opportunity to be the person you were always meant to be, before the judgments, before the conditioning, before the trauma. And there's kind of like this beautiful energy inside that's kind of guiding you into this light and saying, yeah, maybe you're not supposed to say yes to everybody, you just think it, but maybe that's not right.
Yeah. And I think we can say really it's life-changing. Like it changed your life. Definitely changed your life. And it's the same for me. You mentioned 2017, and I think for me it was around that time, maybe a little bit later, 2018, when I actually realized that even in my romantic relationships, and even in my friendships, and especially family relationships, I didn't have healthy boundaries. And as you mentioned, and I think that really with the family relationships, I think I'm more sensitive, more I wouldn't say difficult, but it's definitely more sensitive in a way that for me, that's the one that I'm still learning, and like I'm learning everything, of course, even though I'm coaching too, but still you're still learning. And for me, with family relationship, I'm still learning almost, I can say, every day, every week, how to set my healthy boundaries, not blaming, not hurting, but to be able to say no, and to be able to understand the others, and to be able to be understood. So yeah, it's definitely a life-changing thing to go through.
Yeah, and I would have a level of fear and panic around that. That still happens. I can still be challenged by certain people and their reactions. But I try to give myself time and space to think about how I respond to that. Yeah. And sometimes when you just give someone time and space to have their reaction and you disappear, when you come back, there's a little bit more rationality there, you know. Yeah. So there's always, whereas before I'd feel the need to respond, to get into the story, to defend myself, all those different things. You know, it's something that in 2023 I set the intention to give myself time and space between my feelings and reactions, you know. And there's so much knowledge in that. By giving yourself time and space, you learn a lot, because then sometimes you say, I actually don't need to do anything here. I actually don't need to say anything. I'm just going to let that settle. Or, you know, oh yeah, maybe I can understand. Or, as you said earlier, you start to understand that somebody else is in a fear response, and you can actually be compassionate around that, and that kind of brings a person down, and then there's great opportunity for compromise, understanding, and the situation goes away, you know. So yeah,
but it really happens when you start practicing these healthy boundaries, and also just to start getting to know yourself, and it's, you know, it comes together. So my last question for you is, how can people contact you the easiest way?
So a lot of people use Instagram now. So I'm on Instagram. I think you're going to put the handle in the video, but it's @_thewellnesslounge.ie. So @_thewellnesslounge.ie. My website is thewellnesslounge.ie, and all my contact details are on there. And there's information on that course as well, that 6-week course. So yeah, and I'd love to, you know, hear from people. People can just get in contact with questions, you know, they don't have to commit to signing up to anything as well. If anything I said today resonates with anybody or evokes some kind of curiosity, I'd be happy to chat further.
Thank you so much. And everyone, Gillian's contacts are below the video. You can find all the info about how to reach her. So if you like the video, and if you like this topic, or you have a recommendation about the topic that you are interested in, about mental health or even physical health, please just leave a comment, or contact me, or contact Gillian about her work. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe. So Gillian, that was great. That was amazing. And it was really interesting, because I heard so many things that I agree with, and also some new things that I can also learn from. So thank you for your time, and I hope to see you again here back soon.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite. Lovely talking to you too. Thanks a million.
Thank you.